Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us again for yet another webinar. This one is, of course, in collaboration with Austroads, covering cycling and the Austroads Guides relating to cycling. Before we launch into the presentation, ladies and gentlemen, we will go through a few housekeeping items. So our webinar presentation today will be approximately an hour in duration. So we're trying to keep to about 30 minutes presentation and then leave it open for discussion. So obviously we do welcome you to type your questions through to us. Can I get the next slide, please, Michael?
Yes.
So that's Michael there. He will be our primary presenter today, and he's a senior engineer, one of our very own here at ARB Group in our New South Wales office. Assisting Michael today, we have many of you would know him, Gary Veith, also formerly ARB, and Peter Eadie joining us to assist me with the moderation today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we do have a very large audience with us today, which is fantastic, but it does mean that perhaps we may not get through all of the questions we received today. So thank you to everyone who does send them through, and that's great. And if we by any chance don't get to them during the course of the presentation, please feel free to touch base with us once the webinar is concluded and we can address those for you. Next slide, please, Michael. So that's myself. If there are any webinar-related concerns, technical issues, feedback of any variety, please feel free to touch base with me anytime. Everyone will be sent a copy of the presentation material as well as the recording of today's session, so don't worry too much about jotting down notes. You'll receive all of that in your email later on this afternoon. Next slide, please. If you do have questions for Michael, Peter or Gary, please do type them into the questions box and send them through, and we'll tally those up at our end and address them at various stages during the presentation. And as I did mention before, we do have a very large audience, so if we don't get to your question, please do touch base with us once the webinar has concluded. And I think that's just about enough from me. A very warm welcome to Michael, Peter and Gary, who are joining us from various locations today for today's webinar. Michael, could you start us off and tell us a little bit about yourself and what's been your involvement with the Austroads Guides relating to cycling?
Sure, Angela. Good morning and afternoon to everyone. I guess so my involvement in the Austroads Guides and Austroads in general is I've been involved in a number of different guide updates. This is primarily in the area of traffic management, and I've also was recently involved in the update of the cycling aspects of the Austroads Guides document. And I've been working here at ARB for about 6 years or so, and yeah, I've been involved in a number of different Austroads projects in addition to the guide updates.
Wonderful. And Gary, I understand you're a little bit of a cycling enthusiast. Would that be right?
Yes, my commuting to work took place in the mid-70s and from about mid-1985 through the 2000s. In the late 80s I was given the task of looking after bicycle programs and guides for Vic roads as part of my job, and probably my claim to fame was Guide to Traffic Engineering Practice Part 14, which started my involvement in bicycle guides. In recent years with ARB, I've been involved in a lot of the Guide to Traffic Management and Guide to Road Design guides, which include cycling incidents.
Fantastic. And Peter, would you like to say hello to our audience today? That's Peter Eadie from ARB's Melbourne office. How are you going, Peter?
Pretty good, thanks. Yep, so I'm an engineer in the Congestion, Freight and Productivity team. Had a bit of involvement in the first edition of the cycling aspects of Austroads Guides report, and we've kept up to date with it a bit since then.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I think we're interested in launching straight into the presentation. So, Michael, I'll hand back over to you to start us off. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Angela. Just 1 second. I think I need to, don't know if I need to minimize this. Can I just ask, is the webinar thing appearing on the side of my screen?
No.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure that that's not being viewed. Okay, well, I will get started. So first I'll start off with an overview of the presentation. So the presentation is divided into two main parts. In the first part, I'll conduct a review of the various Austroads guides and cycling-related content, and discuss a little bit how you can navigate through this guidance to find information on cycling. And then in the second part, we'll discuss some of the emerging guidance on cycling topics, some related Austroads research that's being undertaken related to this, and some case studies of cycling practice. So starting off, navigating through the Austroads guides can be a bit of a challenge when it comes to finding information on cycling, because as according to the current Austroads guide structure, there is no guide that is solely devoted to cycling. Gary had mentioned that previously there was a part of the guide to traffic engineering practice that was devoted to cycling, but in the current guide structure, the cycling content has been reallocated into a variety of different guides. So this can create a challenge for finding information on different things. So there are a number of documents that kind of provide the key cycling related information, and these include the ones that you see listed here. This includes the cycling aspects of Austroads guides, the guide to road design, the guide to traffic management, and the guide to road safety. And starting with the cycling aspects of Austroads guides, this is the document that has kind of can be placed in the middle of all the other Austroads guides to assist practitioners in finding information that is located in the various Austroads guides. So just a little bit about the cycling aspects document. The second edition of the document was published last year in 2014. And the cycling aspects document has been developed not as an Austroads guide, but as a summary document. This means that it reflects the key information that's found in the other Austroads guides on cycling facilities and issues, and it also provides cross-references to the various guides and important information and details. And just a few things to note about the cycling aspects document. In general, you will find greater detail on cycling facilities and issues in the Austroads guides, and a broader context of how cycling fits into the various things that a guide is covering than what you would find in the cycling aspects document. But again, it's not as conveniently located as the structure that's provided in the cycling aspects document. And just a couple of other things to note about the cycling aspects document is that as Austroads guides are updated, the cycling aspects document may not reflect what's in the most recent guides. The cycling aspects document has generally been updated every 2 to 3 years based on the first 2 editions, and I think that's planned to continue in the future. For example, the current version of the cycling aspects document will not reflect any guide updates that have occurred from 2014 until the present, and that'll continue until it's updated once again. Moving on to the guide to road design, there are a series of parts of the guide to road design that contain key cycling related content. This includes Part 3 of the Guide to Road Design, which deals with geometric design, and this contains information on on-road cycling facilities, your mid-block facilities such as cycle lanes and other types of facilities. There's also the series of guides that make up Part 4 of the Guide to Road Design. That's Part 4, 4A, 4B, and 4C, and these provide design guidance on the different types of cycling facilities for various types of intersections, including unsignalized and signalized intersections, roundabouts, and grade separated interchanges. Another key guide is Part 6A, which provides information on paths for cycling. So that is the Guide to Road Design. In the Guide to Traffic Management, cycling guidance is dispersed amongst a number of different parts of the guide, such as these parts that you see listed here. I think probably in general there's not as many large sections of content, so it does make it a bit more of a challenge to find information in the various parts. The Cycling Aspects document has brought those together and provides cross-references to where you can go to find additional details in the Guide to Traffic Management. So in addition to the Guide to Road Design and Guide to Traffic Management, there is supporting Austroads guidance that's available in a number of other guides. In general, a lot of these other guides will provide more general guidance that may be applicable to specific cycling information or development of cycling facilities. So they may not be relevant to all things that you're looking for. The Cycling Aspects document does provide cross-references to a number of these documents that you can refer to for further information on where you might want to use these documents. So just providing a little of information here on how the Austroads Guides are developed and what goes into reviewing Austroads Guides. So there are a number of things that are taken into consideration when an Austroads Guide review is done or a guide is developed. This includes things such as Austroads research projects, the practices that are undertaken in jurisdictions and the supplemental guidance that they develop, practitioner feedback from people such as many of you who are listening to the webinar today. There may also be other considerations that need to be taken into account in other guide reviews or updates of other Austroads guides, and there can be other things as well that may be specific to a particular guide that may be considered as well. So all of these things will be taken into consideration when a guide is updated. And just a note about practitioner feedback, the Arbor Library does maintain a registry of Austroads Guide issues, and this is a process of logging issues that have been identified and then having that information available for when a guide review is undertaken. And feedback may be provided by a number of different methods. The Austroads website provides a feedback form. Feedback can be obtained through things such as today's webinar or contacting our staff. Other Austroads projects also obtain feedback that can be passed on to the guide reviews. I know when we undertook the cycling aspects of Austroads Guides review a few years ago, there was quite a number of comments and feedback that were received from a variety of different people, and this feedback has been passed on to the various guide reviews and are being considered in the guide reviews and updates that are taking place at the moment. So I think that was the last slide, and we are going to open it up for see if there's any questions so far.
Absolutely. Look, thank you, Michael, for the presentation so far. And we have received a few questions, and I might hand it over to Peter to ask those of our panel here today. Over to you, Peter.
All right, thank you for that. First off, there's been a number of questions about sharrow markings so far. We will be mentioning sharrow markings in brief a bit further on in this presentation, but I think it might be a bit more right to ask those questions at the end. So we'll just leave those for a moment. We aren't ignoring your questions, but just not right now. All right. So we've got one question here. Is there somewhere with guidance for cycling design in car parks, such as in multi-storey buildings?
Thank you for that question, Catherine. And what do our presenters have to say about that?
Go ahead, Gary.
I'm not aware of any guidance in any of the Austroads Guides relating to cycling design in car parks with multi-storey buildings. However, you know, I'm not aware of a lot of cycling provision within those areas in terms of specific signing for cyclists and that sort of thing. I guess if that sort of guidance is needed and it relates to signage and markings, I would expect to occur within the Australian standards primarily, and there is a I guess a process for state road authorities to input to the MS12 committee, as it has been in the past, to debate that issue, and local governments represented on that committee. When it comes to the signs and markings, one should refer to the local jurisdictional signs and markings manuals firstly, the Australian standards secondly, and then Austroads builds on those particular things.
Alrighty, thanks for that, Gary. Perhaps our next question, please.
Yep, so we've got one here from Nicola, who has asked, how will changes in design guides or advice be disseminated prior to the release on any formal guide? Not sure.
Do you want me to handle this one, Angie?
Go for it, Gary. Love to hear from you again.
With the guides, the guides themselves are not disseminated to the draft guidelines are not disseminated throughout the local community, but there are panels, Austroads panels that determine what the structure of guides will be and what the content will be and what the detail will be. I know on the Guide to Road Design panel that I've been involved in the past, it's generally been the design managers of state road authorities, and there's been a representative on the panel also from local government and from the Australian Bicycle Council. The way in which people can influence the guides is to send emails to Austroads, and I think the email address might be austroads@austroads.com.au, and those comments are sent to ARB to be placed on the database. So if there's something you think should be in the guides or something that should be changed, any comments, then you can fire an email off to Austroads, and that'll be considered in the review of any particular guideline.
And we'll certainly get that email address out to everyone here today that may be interested in providing feedback for future.
There'd just be one more comment on that, and I think it's true to say that guidelines and standards tend to lag behind new practices. The new practices are adopted, and the case of the Sharrow is probably a case of that. We find that local government or state road authorities, they devise different ways of doing things, improved ways of doing things, and it does take some time for that to go through a process and be adopted. I prefer these things to be, I prefer uniform guidelines throughout Australia, and so I think if there is a groundswell for the use of Sharrows out there, then I think that should be accompanied by some lobbying from local government and other people who believe that they're the best thing for wayfinding and that sort of thing.
Fair enough. We might take one more question before we move on with the presentation.
Okay. This one might be a bit harder one for us to answer, but the guides to traffic engineering practice, they've since been updated into the new Austroads Guides. Do we know if there's any way of accessing those?
Michael, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Well, I know that in general, Austroads, when a guideline is no longer the current guide, then it's no longer available on the Austroads website. So from my understanding, the only way to access these would be someone who has a hard copy of these. But certainly things such as the ARB library or other places like that would still have copies. But in general, I think Austroads has taken the view that they don't make available electronically the superseded guides.
Thanks, Michael. How about we do a few more slides and then we'll go back to questions again. Over to you, Michael.
Okay. Yeah, I will just mention that for the feedback, I have provided at the end of the presentation the link and where you can provide feedback on the Austroads website. Okay, but so moving on with the presentation, in the next section was going to provide just a few different areas where there's emerging research guidance and case studies available that may be of interest to practitioners. So I'll just touch on a few different topics here. One is the Guide to Traffic Management Part 4 and developments that have occurred with multimodal level of service. And then also discuss a few things about the Guide to Road Design, including roundabouts and on-road bicycle lanes. And I'll discuss a little bit about parking and end-of-trip facilities. This may relate a little bit to the question that was just asked about parking facilities, so we'll discuss that a little bit. And then I'll also mention bicycle wayfinding and some of the work that's being done in that area. Okay, so and just one other thing I wanted to note, this had to do with some case studies that have been developed by Austroads. So these are of interest as we're talking about Austroads guides and as Gary was mentioning, the amount of time that it takes for practice to get updated into the guides. There's two documents that came out from Austroads last year that provide a number of different case studies on different cycling practice. So these are quite good to see some of the areas where practice is developing that may not yet be reflected in the Austroads guides. So just be aware of these, and I'll touch upon these when we talk about the topics that I noted there as well. So the first area that I was going to provide a little bit of an update on is the Guide to Traffic Management Part 4. So this guide deals with managing traffic at a network level. The second edition of the guide was published in 2014. And the key area that the guide was expanded was on the topic of network operation planning. And this network operation planning relates to the planning process for balancing and prioritizing competing needs of different road users. So I'll touch on that a little bit, and then I'll also note that Part 4 of the guide is also under review at the moment, and this is looking to expand a review of the whole guide and not just look at the network operation planning. So this guide review will consider Section 4.6, which discusses bicycle networks and some of the various things related to that. So there should be some updated guidance that is available in that guide in the near future. So just mentioning a little bit about network network operation planning. This slide here just shows, on the left is the network operation planning framework, which is just a method of developing network operation objectives and into strategies and improvement plans that can be done to improve management of your various different types of road users and their competing interests, and then ways that these can be assessed and evaluated as well. On the right is a gap analysis map, which is a method that's been developed for looking at the competing needs of different road users and identifying what the conflicts are and competing needs and so forth. You probably won't be able to read the information on this figure, but it's just illustrating that process. And as part of the network operation planning, a recent project has looked at developing level of service metrics to support network operations planning. And this has set out a framework for looking at the level of service for your different types of road users. And it's developed a high-level planning tool and checklist that can be used to look at level of service for different road users and to highlight the trade-offs between the different groups. So for cycling, there's been a number of level of service measures that were developed. These are based on your different needs that you have, such as mobility, safety, access information, and amenity. And then taking a look at how this would be applied, the research report that was done did provide some example applications of how this would work. This example shows the widening of a shared path along a road in an area where there's also freight movements that would need to be considered in the impact of this type of a treatment. So using the level of service framework, it allows an assessment to be done of the various level of service needs and measures that were developed. This isn't a complete list that's shown on the slide here. There's a number of different ones, but it's just illustrating that you can look at the changes that would occur before the treatment was installed and then after it was, against a variety of level of service measures, and then you can look at the outcome of this treatment. And in this case, there was a series of improvements that were identified for cyclists in terms of mobility, safety, access, and amenity. Also an improvement in pedestrian safety by widening the shared path. But the other impact that needed to be considered was the impact on freight amenity. So that's was an interesting research project that relates to cycling, and this guidance is being considered in the current update that's going on of the Guide to Traffic Management Part 4. So next I'll just talk a little bit about bicycle facilities at roundabouts. The Guide to Road Design Part 4B addresses the development of bicycle facilities at roundabout and their design. And the first edition of this guide was published in 2011. A review is currently underway to look at potentially updating the guidance that is provided there and to consider the application of bicycle lanes on roundabouts. And this is an area where there has been a lot of interest and different practices that are being considered, taking into consideration the safety issues that cyclists need to consider at roundabouts. So the case study report that was recently developed by Austroads did show some different designs that are a bit different than what is currently included in the Austroads Guide. Some questions were raised about Sharrow markings. This is an example application of applying sharrows. In this picture here, this is showing a roundabout where a cycle lane has been terminated prior to the roundabout, and then a sharrow marking has been used to highlight the mixing area where a cyclist would join the main traffic stream prior to entering the roundabout. So this is one different variation on design of a roundabout facility for cyclists. The case study report also showed examples of where a separated path has been provided around the exterior of a roundabout. So a on-road cycle lane would end on the approach to a roundabout, and then a separated facility is provided around the exterior of the roundabout. And I believe this example is one from the ACT. So another area that should be noted is some of the different research projects that have been undertaken by Austroads related to bicycles at roundabouts. There was a report that was released last year which had conducted an investigation of on-road lanes at roundabouts, and it had provided a number of findings on some different elements of design of roundabouts. And kind of building on this research, there's another project that's being undertaken that's doing further exploration of some of the crash analysis and safety issues related to cyclists at roundabouts, and then considering some potential treatment options, considering the current practices that are included in the Austroads Guide, and then some other practices that were discussed in the report from 2014, and with the view to develop some design guidance. And as part of this project is looking for examples of road agency experiences with treatments at roundabouts. So if people are aware of good examples, or I guess it could be examples that have worked out well or have been less successful, then the project would be interested in knowing more about these. Okay, so next I'll mention a little bit about the Guide to Road Design Part 3. This is the part that provides guidance related to on-road bicycle lanes, including your different types of bicycle lanes, such as exclusive lanes, separated lanes or separated cycleways, contraflow lanes, sealed shoulders, and other types of treatments. So this is one area where there has been a lot of practice that has developed that may not yet be reflected in the Austroads Guide. This guide is currently under review, so hopefully it will get a chance to capture some of this emerging practice, but it is a challenge with the developments that are occurring in this area. This just shows some of the things that have been developing. Two-way separated cycle lanes, such as the one that's shown here, which is taken from one of the case studies in the Austroads report that came out last year. There's other methods of separating cycle lanes that may be less permanent, or I think they're sometimes referred to as buffered treatments and so forth, that these may not be addressed in Part 3 as well. So it's recognized that there is development in this area, and this guidance has yet to be incorporated into Part 3, but it will be an area that needs to be considered in the future, in considering how the practice evolves in Australia. Okay, just mention a few other things. One of the areas where there's limited guidance in the Austroads Guides is facilities related to bridges and tunnels. This includes both facilities that seek to provide a separated treatment around things such as bridges or tunnels, and then treatments looking to improve safety of cyclists on things such as narrow bridges. The the recent report that came out by Austroads did identify some case studies of where these types of treatments had been applied, which is of interest, and provide some good practices that aren't currently included in the Austroads Guides. Parking in end-of-trip facilities, this is another area where there's been a lot of development and practice. Guidance on parking is provided in the Guide to Traffic Management Part 11, which deals with parking, of all types of parking, but it does include information on bicycle parking and end-of-trip facilities. But since the first edition has been developed, there has been a number of developments and practices for providing these that isn't reflected in there. I don't believe there's much information that specifically addresses car parks, as the question was asked, but it does provide general guidance on things that should be provided for bicycle parking and trip facilities that may be of interest. But there are other practices that have yet to be included. The Austroads report that came out last year presented case studies of things such as this photo, which is shown here, of providing on-street bike corrals in place of where on-street car parking was previously provided, and other innovative practices that are looking at providing parking in end-of-trip facilities. I'll mention one more thing here, and this is bicycle wayfinding. This is an area where there's limited guidance available in the existing Austroads guides. I think this was there was feedback received when we did the cycling aspects document that this is one area that practitioners would like to see more guidance. And there is a current Austroads project that is reviewing bicycle wayfinding practices. And the intent of this project is to provide considerations for future Austroads Guides updates that relate to this topics. And in addition to that, there's also case studies that are provided in one of the Austroads reports that came out last year's. This was the low-cost interventions selected case studies report. So that may be of interest to practitioners as well, and I guess looking forward to the future, we can look to having some improved guidance developed on bicycle wayfinding in the Austroads Guides. So that was the last topic that I was going to point out in relation to developments in the Austroads Guides. So just as a summary of what we've presented here, we've provided an overview of the range of Austroads guides and reports that are available to assist in the development of cycling facilities. We've touched on a number of the Austroads research projects and guide reviews that are currently underway that can contribute towards improving practitioner guidance on cycling facilities, and have pointed out some different case studies that have been developed that present some of the practice in areas where there's limited guidance available in the Austroads Guides. So I think that is the end of our the presentation here. So I'll turn it back to Angela.
Absolutely. Look, thanks, Michael, for popping that information together and giving us an overview of what the Austroads Guides do currently have to offer. If you want to pop it to, I think the next slide has the information, the email address, yours?
Yes. Yes.
So if people do want to contact you after the webinar, as I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, we do have a large audience and a lot of questions, which is great, but we won't be able to address them all in the next 22 minutes. But there are Michael's details in case you do want to touch base with him once the webinar has concluded. And I think we've got time for some questions and a bit of discussion now. So thank you to those of you who got your questions in. And next 20 minutes we'll get through as many of those as we can. Peter, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So we have had a number of questions about Shari markings. That appears to be one of the major topics out there that people have been finding interesting. And really there's not that much information out there in the Austroads guidance on sharrow markings.
Will there be?
Well, I suppose that's up to people to let Austroads know that information is deemed important. Gary, do you have something?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think if this is going to be a traffic control device that we use extensively throughout the network, then the case for the sharrow marking should be made to Austroads and to those who write the guides, and local government can provide a lot of assistance in that regard. And as part of that, I think the question mentions, where they should be used and how they should be located. And I would add to that what law might be written around it as to what is expected of motor vehicles if they are, for example, presented with a sharrow marking in front of them on the approach to the roundabout. And I would like to think that they would have an obligation by law to give way to cyclists who are leaving that terminating bike lane into the approach of the roundabout. So it basically introduces the idea that there is an area on the approach to a roundabout where cyclists, motorists have an obligation to yield to cyclists, if I can put it that way.
And Michael, any further thoughts on sharrows or anything further to add on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with Gary that I think that they're something that merits further review into how they can be applied in Australia. I know myself, being originally from North America, I've seen the practices that are used with sharrows in Colorado, where I'm from. They're used quite extensively, and I think that they have been successful and they are helpful in a number of situations. But I think, as Gary was saying, guidance would need to be developed into where they're used, how they're located, what their meaning is, and then I guess what the implications are for the road rules and so forth as well. All those things would need to be considered into how guidance is developed on their use.
Yeah, I think with these things, I believe that if it's to be included in a guideline or an Australian standard, then I think we need to have sufficient representation from the authorities out there responsible for local roads and other roads that they say yes, they subscribe to this thing and try to get a national standard in place. And hopefully that shouldn't take forever.
So it would also involve a lot of local government, because sharrows are used mainly on the lower speed local roads.
Yeah, but we still have the issue of roundabouts on arterial roads as well, and that's why I guess I mentioned the priority on the approaches where you do have those sharrows. And it'd be good to think that given the problem of cyclist safety at larger roundabouts and some of them on secondary arterials or even local roads that are significant traffic routes, I think we probably need to embrace that, that sort of marking for that purpose. But I guess the large problem at roundabouts is that the 50% of the conflicts seem to be between entering traffic and circulating traffic. So that's another area that I hope the study will be able to come to some good conclusions when it's concluded.
All right. Well, thank you for the sharrows-related questions, ladies and gents. And if anyone does have any more feedback or comments or thoughts on that, I'm sure Austroads would very much appreciate hearing from you. Do we have any questions unrelated to sharrows?
We might start with this one. So is there any guidance on the width of medians in order to cater for cyclists? At the moment, the author of this question, David, has suggested that the guidance only gives widths for pedestrians and signals.
So, Gary, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the situation. And we had someone touch on, there was a question here too, to do with urban situations where, you know, the Austroads Guides, they specify that they're for greenfield sites. A lot of the problems we have in designing facilities around urban areas are really brownfield sites, and Austroads has not to date produced guides that relate to brownfield sites. I guess the thing is that quite often it's how narrow can you go, or how low can you go in any particular parameter in those situations where you've got competing needs for space, and you know, at the end of the day, the people looking after that situation, that piece of road or intersection, have got to work out how they'll balance the space amongst users and what implications that has on the widths or the standards involved. I think with the width of medians, it's you know, it can be an issue around medians. I think if you've got signals and pedestrians, the minimum width is 2.4 metres, and I guess that would accommodate a cyclist or a couple of cyclists standing side by side. But if you get a group of cyclists, it becomes pretty tricky. Where, for example, a shared path is taken through a signalised intersection down on Footscray Road or something like that. So I guess you know, the information in the guide doesn't specifically mention what's required for cyclists, but in those brownfield sites, it's pretty hard to provide huge or very wide medians quite often. So I'm afraid that's all I can say. You know, the designers have got to try and do their best for what the demands are.
Another question, Peter?
Yep. So we've got a couple of questions about the guides. We'll get back to them rather than that. So do we know if there's any plans to shift to a more of an online form or a database format for the cycling aspects documents, which would be able to give us those hyperlinks to the guides?
Yeah, well, you know, it's Gary again. I think the question is, are there any plans to shift to an online database format for the cycling aspect document, which would hyperlink to the current guides? I don't believe there would be any plans for that. That's not to say it couldn't happen if Austroads was approached. When the guides were first being planned, this new set of guides, you know, on various aspects as Michael displayed, the question of hyperlinking the guides was raised, and Austroads made a definite decision not to go that way. I'm not sure what that decision was based on, but you know, there may be some commercial aspects. Austroads charges for guides, so there might be some commercial aspect related to that decision. There are some people I've spoken to who have the opinion that perhaps Austroads guides should be free. You know, you can sit at your computer and download a guide from many states in America, but and use it freely. But I don't believe that you know, Austroads is in favour of that approach at this stage. So I guess if we want to have that ability to hyperlink or other access to guides under different terms, then that would be a matter for people to lobby Austroads in that regard.
Yeah, I'll just add one other thing there is I believe there has been consideration in Austroads to develop some kind of a online content management system, I guess, for all the various Austroads guide, not just the cycling related content. So if it was set up, there would be some way that you could customize and find content for specific topics such as cycling or aspect of cycling. And it would just go into
Thanks,
the
Michael.
content.
Gary, you...
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you able to hear my comment there?
Nicola, regarding at bus stops in particular, and in particular along separated paths. Do you know if there's any guidance available for how cyclists interact with buses?
Cycling and buses. Michael, do you have anything to add on that at this stage?
I think I was cut out there for part of that. So the question related to issues related to cycling and buses. I believe that was the question. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was an Austroads research report that was done a few years ago that did focus on that issue, and I believe that guidance based on the outcomes of that project was included in the Austroads Guide and is included in the cycling aspects document. As far as any recent developments in that area, I'm not as familiar with, I guess, anything that's going on. I don't know if you have any knowledge in that area, Gary, or anyone else?
No, I can recall the report you're speaking about, but it is we've experienced a similar issue in trying to manage bicycles bypassing the improved tram stops around Melbourne, where you tend to get the mix of cyclists and pedestrians on the footpath. And I think the best we've been able to do is to provide good delineation. It is a bike path going through the middle of the actual the standing area around the between the tram and the pedestrians who might be waiting. I don't think anyone's come up with any innovative way of dealing with that potential conflict. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, in that case, we'll move on to another question. So Dwayne here has asked, he said that Austroads guidance and shared paths seems to be limited and perhaps inconsistent. That the road design part 6A seems to suggest that shared paths should only be built where cycling volume or speed is expected to be low. And some see this as contradicting guidance on path width. Elsewhere, guidance suggests that paths should be built for cycling where the speed would be 30 an hour or more. This would seem to suggest that shared paths should not be used as main cycling routes. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I can't remember the flowchart, but it's not true that they're always built for 20 kilometres per hour. We do have some veloways, Adelaide and Western Australia and other places where it caters specifically for high-speed commuter travel. It seems to be, the reality seems to be that many of our bicycle paths are in watercourses, along watercourses and freeways where you can get up to reasonable speed on some sections, but a lot of designs, for whatever reason, sometimes introduce tighter curves sometimes when there's no apparent reason for that. So, and we tend in Victoria that most of the paths become shared rather than exclusive bicycle paths. So, I guess if you build a path, pedestrians are going to walk on it as well.
So any thoughts about conflicts between pedestrians, especially those who might be sight impaired, and cyclists on shared paths?
No, not really. I know. There's plenty of. I'm riding every week on paths. Now I'm a bit older and I don't like arterials as much. There's certainly plenty of potential for conflicts out there. But it's a matter of warning the pedestrians that you're about to pass, and there is a behavioural problem out there with some people.
Yeah, very much so.
And I don't know that engineering can address that.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So we've got another question here about Do we know if there's any Austroads guidance regarding the use of service lanes by cyclists, especially when those service lanes come back into the arterial road at intersections and the cyclists have to join the traffic stream again?
Yeah. Do you want to say anything, Michael, or do you want me to handle this?
Well, yeah, I'll just mention a few things that I'm aware of, and then I guess you can add, Gary. Yeah, I know that there in the Guide to Road Design there is some sections of I think Part 3 and Part one of the I think it's Part 4 and a few places that discuss service lanes, but I don't think it specifically talks about cycling facilities. I think you would have to cross-reference some of the material that talks about the cycling facilities and then try to apply that to service lanes. So I don't think there's specific guidance that I'm aware of that addresses bicycle facilities on service lanes themselves. Gary, are you aware of anything that addresses that issue?
No, I took the opportunity to look through the guides prior to this, just to flick through, and I specifically looked at that aspect, and no, there is no guidance there. I guess in my commuting to work, along a major highway that had service roads, I would tend to, depending on the time I was travelling, I'd either use the main carriageway, or typically coming home from work when I wasn't in so much of a hurry, I'd use the service roads, because inevitably the service roads are slower. You've got to find your way through intersections and signalised intersections and other. A lot of councils introduce local area traffic management devices in service roads and put in terminations just to stop the speed in the service roads. And of course the disadvantage of that to a commuter in particular is that it slows you down on your trip. So and we're continually getting into this argument about whether, why are cyclists on the road when there's a shared path there bumping up and down across every side street, for example. And I think a lot of motorists don't seem to think that you should be off the major carriageway. I think service roads generally, they can provide a bit of a safer environment for local cycling trips and perhaps people who are less experienced or just don't want to take the risk of being out on the main carriageway. And I guess also for some children going to school, they might offer, some of the low volume service roads might offer a reasonably safe route. But so I guess the facilities there is a sort of a local street, but we don't seem to have any specific advice anywhere to say, that this is how you would do it if you wanted to provide for service roads. One other aspect with service roads is they often combine parking too, which and angle parking even, which can create hazards for the more commercial areas, for cyclists.
Most certainly. We probably have time for one, maybe two more questions. Peter, over to you.
All right. So we've got another question here regarding the Austroads Guides, and I suppose how much new development should meet those guides. So the question states that Austroads Guides are described as being guides. However, the question asker is aware that of one council at least, that are not implementing a piece of cycling infrastructure because it is just outside the guidelines. Do we believe that councils are constricted to remain within these guidelines, or should there be a level of the councils being able to move outside of these?
No, well, it's quite clear that they are guidelines and they're not a standard or a specification, so councils are able to move outside of those guidelines. It's accepted that that in moving outside of the guidelines, that a designer or whoever would have to analyse the situation and weigh up all the risks and the advantages and disadvantages of their proposal, and to come to a conclusion as to whether they felt comfortable with going ahead with that design. And there's nothing new in that. That has always been the case. The guides are there to guide professional people who are involved in this sort of decision making, but at the end of the day, the responsibility for that treatment will rest with that authority or that person. It's equally true that if one implemented a treatment that was within the guidelines, but in an inappropriate circumstance or situation, that the person should, I guess, have the professional judgment to realise, that there may be some risk with that, and perhaps not do it quite the way it's shown in the guide, or not do it at all.
That's a good point, Gary. Michael, do you have anything to add on that before we finish up for today's session?
Yeah, I don't know if I have any specific to add there. Yeah, I think as Gary mentioned, they are guidelines, and they've been developed and as to be that and not to be a standard. And then there are practices. There's a section in the Guide to Road Design that talks about extended design domain and things such as that, which provide some guidance on when you might want to consider going beyond or deviating from what is provided in the Austroads Guides.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea if people are going to use the guidelines that they read parts 1 and 2 of the Guide to Road Design, for example, that talks about the philosophy of design and standards and that sort of thing, and guides, and you only have to read it once, and it gives you the overall view of the philosophy and that sort of thing of what the guidelines mean. So I'd recommend that people at least read that once.
Great tip, Gary. Something for everyone to consider. Well, a very big thank you for all of you who have joined us today. I know that we didn't address all the questions, and I do apologise if one of those questions that we missed was yours. Please do touch base with us after the webinar if you feel that you'd like to discuss that question further. Once I close down the webinar, ladies and gentlemen, you will receive a little pop-up survey on your screen. It's just a few short questions, and if you could fill that in for us, we'd be very grateful. We are also looking to run further training, perhaps in an online format, on various aspects of cycling. So it would mean very much to us if you could let us know what aspects of cycling you would like to learn more about if you were to attend this training. That can be done via email, either to Michael or myself, on the email addresses that will be sent through to you later on this afternoon, along with the recording and presentation material. A big thank you to Peter, Gary and Michael for joining me both remotely and in the webinar studio today for this afternoon's presentation, and I hope you'll be able to join us for future webinars here at ARB. Thank you.